The stars were different that Tuesday morning when the ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system. They came in a formation that stretched across space like scattered diamonds, their hulls gleaming with alien metal that caught and reflected the distant light of the sun. The ships were massive, each one the size of a small city, and there were hundreds of them hanging in the darkness between Neptune and Pluto. Captain Sarah Martinez was the first human to see them. She sat in the observation deck of Luna Station, drinking her morning coffee and checking the daily reports from the outer system monitoring posts. The coffee was still warm in her hands when the alert came through on her communication device. At first, she thought it was a mistake. The readings showed objects where there should only be empty space. "Computer, run a full scan of Sector 77 Alpha," she said, setting down her coffee cup. The station's powerful sensors turned toward the edge of the solar system, and within minutes, the truth became clear. They were not alone anymore. The news traveled fast through the communication networks that connected all of Earth's colonies and stations. Within an hour, every human settlement from Mars to the asteroid belt knew about the visitors. The news reached Earth itself just as people were sitting down to lunch in New York and getting ready for bed in Tokyo. Dr. James Chen was in his office at the Global Defense Council when the emergency meeting was called. He had been Earth's chief diplomat for alien contact for 15 years, even though everyone assumed that job was mostly for show. The protocols existed, the procedures were written, but nobody really expected to use them. Now everything was different. The meeting room filled with the most important people on Earth. General Roberts from Earth Defense, Dr. Williams from the Science Council, Ambassador Torres from the Outer Colonies, and a dozen other officials who had spent their careers preparing for a day they hoped would never come. "How many ships?" General Roberts asked as soon as everyone was seated. 347 that we can count," Dr. Chen replied, looking at his tablet. "They're arranged in a standard military formation. These are not explorers or traders. This is a war fleet." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. "Have they tried to communicate?" Ambassador Torres asked. "Not yet," Dr. Chen said. "But our protocols require us to make the first contact attempt. We need to follow the established procedures." General Roberts leaned forward in his chair. "What procedures? We don't know anything about these beings. We don't know what they want or how they think. We know they have ships and they brought a lot of them," Dr. Williams said quietly. "That tells us something." Dr. Chen stood up and walked to the large screen at the front of the room. "We follow the first contact protocol. We send a message. We offer peace. We try to establish communication. And we give them a warning." "A warning?" General Roberts laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sarah, we're talking about 300 AWI alien warships. What kind of warning could we possibly give them?" Dr. Chen looked around the room at the faces of his colleagues. These were smart people, dedicated people who had spent their lives protecting humanity. But they didn't know everything. There were secrets that only a few people knew, preparations that had been made long before any of them had been born. "We give them the standard warning," Dr. Chen said. "We tell them that aggressive action would be inadvisable." The message was prepared according to the protocols that had been written decades earlier. It was broadcast on multiple frequencies, translated into mathematical concepts that any advanced civilization should be able to understand. The transmission was simple and polite. "Greetings to the visitors in our solar system. We are the people of Earth and the surrounding worlds. We welcome peaceful contact with other intelligent species. We offer friendship, trade, and the sharing of knowledge. We hope that our two civilizations can benefit from knowing each other. However, Earth respectfully advises that aggressive action would be inadvisable. We hope for peaceful relations." The message was sent at exactly 1400 hours, Earth Standard Time. It traveled through space at the speed of light, carrying humanity's first words to another intelligent species. On the lead ship of the alien fleet, General Thaxmore received the transmission while he was eating his morning meal. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms, wearing the dark blue uniform of the Zephyrian Collective. His ship, the Conquest of Stars, was the largest vessel in the fleet and served as the command center for the invasion force. Thaxmore had been a general in the Collective for 30 years. He had conquered 47 worlds and destroyed the IB, military forces of a dozen different species. Most planets surrendered when they saw his fleet approaching. The few that tried to fight were crushed quickly and completely. He read the human message on his command screen and began to laugh. It started as a quiet chuckle, then grew into loud, echoing laughter that filled the bridge of his ship. His officers looked at him with confusion until he shared the message with them. "Look at this," Thaxmore said, still laughing. "These creatures are warning us. They say that aggressive action would be inadvisable." Lieutenant Zixtar, his second-in-command, read the message and joined in the laughter. "General, they must not understand who we are. Should we tell them about the 47 worlds we have conquered?" "No," Thaxmore said, wiping tears from his eyes. "Let them keep their illusions. It will make the conquest more entertaining." The bridge crew of the Conquest of Stars spent the next hour sharing the human message with other ships in the fleet. Soon, every Zephyrian soldier and officer in the invasion force had read Earth's warning. The laughter spread from ship to ship, like a wave. Commander Blithar, who led the fleet's reconnaissance division, found the message particularly amusing. "Sir," he said to General Thaxmore over the communication system, "my scouts report that these humans have some orbital stations and a few defense satellites. Nothing that would threaten even one of our ships." "How many ships do they have?" Thaxmore asked. "Perhaps a dozen small vessels, General. Mostly used for transportation between their worlds. We detected no military vessels of significant size." Thaxmore nodded. This was exactly what he had expected. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a pre-faster-than-light civilization that could offer meaningful resistance. They had primitive weapons, limited technology, and no understanding of real space warfare. "Prepare the fleet for standard conquest protocol," Thaxmore ordered. "We will approach their home world slowly, give them time to appreciate our power. Many of them will surrender without fighting once they understand the situation." As the Zephyrian fleet began to move deeper into the solar system, Thaxmore allowed himself to enjoy the moment. This would be an easy conquest, perhaps the easiest of his career. The humans seemed like a proud species, which would make their eventual surrender more satisfying. He thought about the warning message again and smiled. Aggressive action would be inadvisable, he repeated to himself. These humans had no idea what real aggression looked like. They were about to learn. The Zephyrian fleet moved through space like a dark cloud, growing larger in the sensors of every human outpost as it approached the inner solar system. 3 weeks had passed since the first message, and General Thaxmore was enjoying every moment of the slow approach. He liked to give his targets time to understand what was coming for them. Each day, the humans sent more messages. They were polite messages, still offering peace and friendship. But buried in the diplomatic language, Thaxmore could detect the growing fear. The humans were beginning to understand that their visitors were not interested in trade or cultural exchange. "General," Lieutenant Zixtar reported during the morning briefing, "we have received another transmission from the human government. They are asking us to state our intentions." Thaxmore leaned back in his command chair. The bridge of the Conquest of Stars was quiet, except for the soft humming of the ship's engines and the occasional beep from the control stations. "Have we responded to any of their messages?" "No, sir. You ordered us to maintain communication silence." "Good. Let them wonder. Fear is a powerful weapon, and it costs us nothing." But Thaxmore decided it was time to have some fun. "Open a channel to the human government. Let me speak to their leaders." The communication link took several minutes to establish. When the human face appeared on the main screen, Thaxamore was surprised by how calm the creature looked. The human introduced himself as Dr. James Chen, and he spoke with the kind of steady voice that Thaxamore had heard from many doomed leaders over the years. "I am General Thaxamore of the Zephyrian Collective," he announced. "Your solar system now belongs to the Collective. Surrender immediately, and your people will be allowed to live as workers in our empire. Resist, and your species will be eliminated." Dr. Chen listened to the translation of Thaxamore's words, then responded with maddening politeness. "General Thaxamore, we appreciate you taking the time to communicate with us. Earth's position has not changed. We offer peaceful contact and mutually beneficial relations. However, we must repeat our earlier advice that aggressive action in this system would not be wise." Thaxamore stared at the human for a long moment. Even now, facing a massive invasion fleet, this creature was giving him warnings. "Dr. Chen, I have conquered 47 worlds. My fleet carries enough firepower to destroy every planet in your system. What possible threat could your primitive civilization pose to the Zephyrian Collective?" Dr. Chen's expression didn't change. "General, we sincerely hope you will reconsider your current course of action. The consequences could be severe for all involved." The communication ended, and Thaxamore found himself staring at a blank screen. Around him, his officers were laughing. Again, the humans were clearly insane if they thought they could threaten the Collective's finest fleet. On Earth, Dr. Chen turned away from the communication console and looked at the other members of the Global Defense Council. The room was silent for a moment. "Well," General Roberts said finally, "that could have gone better." "Actually," Dr. Chen replied, "that went exactly as expected. We've made our position clear. The protocols have been followed. Now we implement the next phase." Admiral Lisa Chen, Dr. Chen's younger sister and the commander of Earth's Defense Force, had been sitting quietly in the corner during the conversation with General Thaxamore. Now she stood up and walked to the secure communication panel. "Activate Operation Garden Party," she said clearly. "Authorization code 77 Alpha Tango 9. The response came immediately from hidden facilities around the solar system. "Garden Party activated. All units standing by." General Roberts looked confused. "Garden Party? Lisa, what are you talking about?" Admiral Chen smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "Jim, you know about the public defense forces. The orbital platforms, the patrol ships, the missile systems that we've built over the past 50 years. What you don't know about are the preparations we've been making for the past 200 years. Dr. Chen nodded. "The protocols for first contact weren't written 50 years ago, Jim. They were written in 1847 after we detected the first signs of the Zephyrian Collective's expansion toward our region of the galaxy. Humanity has been preparing for this day since before your great-grandfather was born. Meanwhile, throughout the solar system, things began to change in ways that the Zephyrian sensors could not detect. On Jupiter's moon Europa, what appeared to be a research station opened hidden doors beneath the ice. Massive shapes moved in the darkness, shapes that had been waiting patiently for decades. In the asteroid belt, rocks that had been carefully hollowed out and equipped with engines began to move toward predetermined positions. To the Zephyrian scouts, they looked like natural asteroids drifting in their ancient orbits. In reality, they were weapons platforms disguised to look like space debris. Captain Martinez, still at Luna Station, watched her screens as coded messages flowed through the communication networks. To anyone listening in, the messages sounded like routine communications about family visits and gardening schedules. In reality, they were activation codes for systems that had been hidden throughout the solar system for generations. "Luna Base to Garden Center," she transmitted. "The roses are blooming ahead of schedule. Request permission to begin early harvest." "Permission granted," came the reply from Earth. "All gardeners are authorized to begin their work." General Thaxamore, unaware of the activity around him, continued his steady approach toward Earth. His fleet maintained perfect formation as it passed the orbit of Saturn. His reconnaissance teams reported the same thing they had been reporting for weeks: minimal human defenses, no significant military presence, no threat to the invasion force. "Sir," Commander Blithar reported, "we are detecting some unusual asteroid movement in the belt region. Nothing that appears threatening, but the patterns are slightly irregular." Thaxmore barely looked up from his tactical display. "Space is full of moving rocks, Commander. Unless they're moving toward us at attack speeds, I'm not concerned." "Yes, sir. Also, we're picking up increased communication traffic from the human settlements. Most of it appears to be routine civilian chatter." "Good. That means they're not coordinating any kind of defense. Fear makes civilians talk more." But Lieutenant Zixtar was studying the communication intercepts more carefully. Something about the human messages bothered him, though he couldn't identify exactly what it was. The messages seemed too calm, too routine for a civilization facing invasion. "General," he said hesitantly, "these human communications, they don't sound like what we usually hear from species facing conquest." Thaxmore finally looked up from his displays. "What do you mean?" "Well, sir, usually by this point we're intercepting panic communications, military coordination attempts, desperate calls for help. These humans are discussing agriculture and family reunions. Either they don't understand their situation or what, Lieutenant?" Zixtar hesitated. He had been with General Thaxmore for 8 years and had participated in 12 conquests. He had never seen anything like this before. "Or they're not afraid of us, sir." The bridge fell silent. The idea that a primitive species might not fear the Zephyrian collective was so absurd that none of them knew how to respond. General Thaxmore stood up from his chair and walked to the main viewing screen, which showed the distant blue dot of Earth growing slowly larger. "Lieutenant Zixtar, I want you to think very carefully about what you just said. Are you suggesting that these humans with their dozen ships and primitive technology are not afraid of 347 Zephyrian warships?" "No, sir. That would be impossible." "Exactly." Thaxmore returned to his chair. "Increase our speed. I want to reach their moon within 72 hours. It's time to show these humans what they should really be afraid of." The Zephyrian fleet reached Earth's moon exactly 72 hours later, just as General Thaxmore had ordered. The massive ships arranged themselves in attack formation, their weapon systems powering up with the distinctive whine that had terrified 47 different worlds. From his position on the bridge of the Conquest of Stars, Thaxmore could see Earth hanging in space like a blue marble, beautiful and defenseless. "Begin standard bombardment protocol," he ordered. "Target their major cities first. We want the survivors to understand what resistance costs." The weapons officers began their targeting sequences, locking onto the population centers that their sensors had identified during the approach. New York, Tokyo, London, Mumbai, all of them would be reduced to ash within minutes. It was a routine that Thaxmore had overseen dozens of times before. "Sir," one of the targeting officers called out, "I'm getting some unusual readings from their moon." Thaxmore glanced at the tactical display. "What kind of readings?" "The surface appears to be shifting, sir. Large sections are moving." Before anyone could respond, the answer became clear. The entire surface of Earth's moon began to open like the petals of a massive flower. What they had assumed was solid rock split apart along lines. That had been invisible until now, revealing that the moon was not a natural satellite at all. "What in the name of the void?" Thaxmore whispered as he stared at the main screen. The moon was artificial. Beneath the carefully constructed rocky exterior lay the largest military installation any of them had ever seen. Massive weapon systems emerged from hidden silos, each one the size of a city block. Launch bays opened to release clouds of fighter craft. Energy shields materialized around the entire structure, glowing with power that made the Zephyrian ships look like toys. "All ships! Emergency evasive maneuvers!" Thaxmore shouted, but he was already too late. The moon's weapons fired, not the primitive kinetic weapons or chemical explosives that the Zephyrians had expected, but exotic energy beams that tore through space itself. The first salvo struck 3 Zephyrian ships and simply erased them from existence. They didn't explode or burn. They just stopped being there. "Shields up! Return fire!" Thaxmore ordered. But his ships were already under attack from other directions. Throughout the solar system, asteroids that had been drifting peacefully in their orbits suddenly shed their rocky disguises. Massive battleships emerged from what had looked like space debris, their hulls gleaming with the same impossible technology that had turned Earth's moon into a fortress. Jupiter's research stations opened like mechanical flowers, revealing that they had never been research stations at all. They were shipyards and weapons platforms, and they began launching wave after wave of human fighters. But these weren't the primitive vessels that the Zephyrian scouts had reported. These ships moved through space like they were dancing, turning, and accelerating in ways that defied everything the Zephyrians knew about physics. "Sir!" Lieutenant Zixtar called out over the sound of alarms and weapons fire. "Our sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. It's like the entire solar system is one giant military installation." A human fighter streaked past the bridge windows of the Conquest of Stars, moving so fast that it was just a blur of light. But in that instant, Thaxmore saw something that made his blood run cold. Through the fighter's cockpit window, he caught a glimpse of the pilot. The human was smiling. "Communications!" Thaxmore shouted. "Get me a channel to the human government!" The channel opened immediately, as if the humans had been waiting for his call. Dr. Chen's face appeared on the screen, and he looked exactly as calm as he had during their first conversation. "General Thaxmore," Dr. Chen said politely. "I trust you're beginning to understand why we advised against aggressive action." "What is this?" Thaxmore demanded. "Your civilization is supposed to be primitive. Our scouts reported minimal defenses." "Your scouts saw exactly what we wanted them to see," Dr. Chen replied. "We've had 200 years to prepare for this meeting, General. We've been watching the Zephyrian Collective's expansion for generations. We knew you would come here eventually." Another wave of explosions rocked the Conquest of Stars as human weapons found their targets. Thaxmore's tactical display showed red warnings everywhere. Half of his fleet was already gone, and the rest were surrounded by human ships that moved like they were alive. "This is impossible," Thaxmore said. "No pre-faster-than-light civilization has technology like this." Dr. Chen's expression grew slightly sad. "General, we achieved faster-than-light travel 60 years ago. We've had colonies in other star systems for decades. We just never felt the need to announce our presence to the galaxy. We were hoping to avoid exactly this situation." The truth hit Thaxmore like a physical blow. "You've been watching us. You knew about our expansion, our methods, our fleet capabilities." "We know about all of your conquests, General. We know about the 47 worlds you've destroyed. We know about the species you've enslaved. We've been preparing for this day since we first detected your empire's expansion toward our region of space." On the tactical display, Thaxmore watched his supposedly invincible fleet being systematically destroyed by weapons he didn't understand, operated by pilots who moved their ships like they were extensions of their own bodies. The humans weren't, just defending their home. They were conducting a carefully orchestrated military operation that had been planned for decades. Admiral Lisa Chen's voice came over the communication channel. "General Thaxmore, this is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Your fleet is surrounded and outgunned. We are prepared to accept your surrender." Thaxmore looked around his bridge. Half of his officers were dead or wounded. Smoke filled the air from damaged systems. The mighty Conquest of Stars, flagship of the Zephyrian fleet, was being held in place by some kind of energy field that his engineers couldn't understand or break. "How?" he asked quietly. "How did you hide all of this, Doctor?" Chen leaned forward slightly. "The same way we've hidden our other colonies, General." The same way we've been observing your empire without being detected. We're very good at not being seen when we don't want to be seen. The implications of Dr. Chen's words slowly sank in. If humanity had been watching the collective for 200 years, if they had colonies that the Zephyrians had never detected, if they had technology that was centuries ahead of what the collective possessed. How many ships do you really have? Thaxmore asked. Enough, Admiral Chen replied. But General, we don't want to be your enemies. We never wanted this fight. We sent you 3 warnings. We tried to give you a chance to leave peacefully, Thaxmore remembered the polite messages, the diplomatic language, the gentle suggestions that aggressive action would be inadvisable. He had laughed at those warnings. His entire fleet had laughed at them. You were trying to save our lives, he said with sudden understanding. We were trying to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, Dr. Chen confirmed. We know what the collective has done to other species. We know about the conquered worlds and the enslaved populations. But we also know that not every Zephyrian chooses to be part of that system. We were hoping we could resolve this peacefully. Another series of explosions echoed through the conquest of stars. Thaxmore's fleet was being destroyed around him, but the human ships were being careful not to target areas where crew members might survive. Even in the middle of a battle, they were trying to minimize casualties. What do you want from us? Thaxmore asked. We want you to go home, Admiral Chen said simply. We want you to tell your leaders that Earth is under our protection. We want the collective to understand that there are consequences for the path you've chosen. Thaxmore looked at his tactical display one more time. Only a few dozen of his ships were still functional, and they were completely surrounded by human vessels that could have destroyed them at any moment. His invasion force, the pride of the Zephyrian military, had been defeated in less than an hour by a species he had thought was primitive. And if we refuse? He asked. Dr. Chen's expression grew cold. Then you'll discover why 47 other species couldn't stop you, but we can. General Thaxmore made his choice. Pride and duty to the collective burned in his chest like fire, even as his ships burned around him in space. He would not surrender to primitives, no matter what impossible weapons they possessed. All ships, he transmitted to what remained of his fleet. Attack pattern Omega. We fight to the last ship. The surviving Zephyrian vessels, fewer than 60 out of the original 347, formed into a desperate attack formation. Their weapons charged up one final time, targeting the human ships that surrounded them like predators, circling wounded prey. But as Thaxmore gave the order to fire, something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't move to defend themselves. They didn't activate shields or take evasive action. Instead, they simply changed. The human fighters that had been darting around the battlefield like silver streaks suddenly shifted in ways that hurt to watch. They folded in on themselves, their shapes becoming something that Thaxmore's eyes couldn't quite follow. One moment they were solid metal spacecraft, the next they were something else entirely. Beings of pure energy, geometric patterns that existed in more dimensions than space should have. The larger human battleships underwent their own transformation. Their hulls became transparent, revealing that what the Zephyrians had thought were ships were actually something far stranger. They were living creatures, or machines, or perhaps something that was both at the same time. Organic curves blended with technological components in ways that made no sense according to Zephyrian science. Sir, Lieutenant Zixtar said in a voice barely above a whisper, what are we looking at? Thaxmore had no answer. The human vessels had become something beyond his understanding, something that existed according to rules of physics that the collective had never discovered. When the Zephyrian weapons fired, the energy beams simply passed through the human ships as if they weren't there. Then the humans began to fight back, and Thaxmore understood that everything he had seen before had been the humans holding back. The exotic energy weapons that had seemed so devastating were apparently the equivalent of warning shots. Now the humans were showing what their technology could really do. Space itself began to twist around the remaining Zephyrian ships. Reality, warped and bent as the humans deployed weapons that attacked the very fabric of existence. Zephyrian vessels found themselves trapped in bubbles of altered time, where seconds stretched into hours. Others were caught in spatial distortions that folded their ships into impossible shapes without actually damaging them, a show of precision that was somehow more terrifying than destruction would have been. The conquest of stars shuddered, as something invisible grabbed hold of it. Thaxmore felt his stomach lurch as the ship was lifted and moved through space by forces he couldn't see or understand. Through the bridge windows, he watched other Zephyrian vessels being carefully collected like toys by an unseen hand. "Admiral Chen," Dr. Chen's voice came over the communication channel. "I think the General is beginning to understand our position." Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main screen. Behind her, Thaxmore could see the bridge of her command ship, but it looked like no military vessel he had ever encountered. The walls seemed to be made of living light, and her crew moved with a fluid precision that spoke of enhancement beyond anything the collective had achieved. "General Thaxmore?" Admiral Chen said, "Your weapons cannot harm our ships. Your ships cannot escape our containment fields. Your communications with the collective are being blocked by our jamming systems. You have no options left except surrender." "What are you?" Thaxmore demanded. "No natural species develops technology like this." "You're right," Dr. Chen said, joining his sister on the screen. "Natural development would have taken us thousands of years to reach this level. But we had help." "Help from whom?" "From the 47 species that the collective conquered," Dr. Chen replied quietly. "Every time your empire destroyed a civilization, a few survivors managed to escape. Over the past 2 centuries, they've found their way to Earth. We've given them sanctuary, and they've shared their knowledge with us." The truth hit Thaxmore like a shockwave. "The species we conquered, they're here?" "Some of them," Admiral Chen confirmed. "The Veltar contributed their mastery of dimensional physics. The Mordoon taught us how to build ships that exist partially outside normal space. The Zenhai showed us how to manipulate time itself. Every species your empire destroyed added to our capabilities. But most importantly," Dr. Chen added, "they taught us about the collective's weaknesses. Every conquered species learned something about your military tactics, your technology, your psychology. When they came to us, they brought that knowledge with them." Thaxmore felt a cold certainty settling in his stomach. "You've been planning this for 200 years, not just preparing defenses, but planning our defeat." "We've been planning to end the collective's expansion," Dr. Chen corrected. "We know about the species you're planning to conquer next. We know about your supply lines, your manufacturing centers, your command structure. The survivors taught us everything." On the tactical display, Thaxmore could see that every surviving ship in his fleet was now held motionless in space by human containment fields. His weapons were useless, his escape routes blocked, his communications severed. The mighty invasion force that had struck fear into the hearts of dozens of species was now as helpless as insects in a web. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you get to make a choice," Admiral Chen said. "You and your surviving crew can return to the collective with a message. Tell your leaders that Earth is under our protection. Tell them that the expansion stops here. Tell them that the species they've conquered are not forgotten and that their suffering has not been ignored. And if the collective refuses?" Admiral Chen's expression grew cold. "Then we'll visit every conquered world in your empire. We'll offer them the same choice we're offering you, freedom or continued slavery. But we won't be asking the collective for permission. The implications of..." Her words were staggering. "If humanity could defeat the collective's finest invasion force this easily, if they had the technology to travel anywhere in the galaxy undetected, if they had been planning this confrontation for centuries." "You're talking about the destruction of our empire," Thaxmore said. "We're talking about the liberation of 47 enslaved species," Dr. Chen replied. What happens to the collective depends on the choices your leaders make. Thaxmore looked around his damaged bridge at the faces of his surviving officers. These were soldiers who had served the collective faithfully for decades, who had believed in the righteousness of their empire's expansion. Now they were seeing the consequences of that expansion in a way none of them had ever imagined. "You could have destroyed us completely," Thaxmore said slowly. "Why are you letting us live?" "Because we're not like the collective," Admiral Chen said. "We don't believe in genocide or slavery. We believe in giving people choices. Your empire has made its choice for 200 years. Now it's time to make a different one." The containment field around the conquest of stars shifted, and Thaxmore felt his ship being moved toward the edge of the solar system. Around him, the other surviving Zephyrian vessels were being gathered into a small convoy. "Take your ships and go home, General," Dr. Chen said. "Tell your leaders what you've seen here. Tell them that the survivors of their conquests have found a new home, and that home is willing to fight for their freedom." As the Zephyrian convoy was escorted to the edge of Earth's solar system, Thaxmore sent one final transmission to his escort ships. "Lieutenant Zixtar, prepare a full report of everything we've witnessed. Include detailed sensor readings of their technology, their tactics, everything we've learned." "Yes, sir." "Should I also include our assessment of their military capabilities?" Thaxmore looked back at Earth, now just a distant blue dot behind them. Around that small planet, he could see the massive defensive installations that had been hidden for 2 centuries, waiting for this moment. He thought about the survivors of 47 worlds working together, sharing their knowledge, planning, their revenge. "Assessment?" Thaxmore said quietly. "Tell the High Command that we have made a terrible mistake. Tell them that the expansion must stop. Tell them that if they send another fleet to this system, none of us will be coming home." 3 months after the failed invasion, the surviving ships of General Thaxmore's fleet limped into the home system of the Zephyrian Collective. What had once been a proud armada of 347 warships was now a pitiful convoy of 58 damaged vessels, their hulls scarred and their crews broken. The High Command was waiting for them. Supreme Commander Vexkari stood in the Great Hall of the Collective's military headquarters, surrounded by the most powerful leaders of the Empire. When General Thaxmore entered the hall, still wearing his torn uniform and bearing the weight of absolute defeat, the silence was deafening. "Explain yourself," Supreme Commander Vexkari said, his 4 arms crossed in a gesture of barely contained rage. "Explain how the Collective's finest invasion force was defeated by a primitive species that hasn't even achieved galactic travel." Thaxmore straightened his shoulders and met the Supreme Commander's gaze. "Sir, with respect, everything we believed about the humans was wrong. They have achieved galactic travel. They have technology that surpasses ours by centuries. And they have been preparing for our arrival for 200 years. Impossible, Fleet Admiral Grixtar interjected. Our intelligence reports show no signs of advanced human civilization beyond their home system. Because they didn't want us to see it, Thaxmore replied. Sir, the humans have mastered stealth technology beyond anything in our databases. They have hidden colonies throughout the galaxy. They have been watching us for generations. He activated a holographic display that showed the recordings his ships had made during the battle. The assembled collective leaders watched in stunned silence as Earth's moon opened like a flower, revealing the massive weapons platform hidden inside. They saw human ships that moved through space like living things, weapons that bent reality itself, technology that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. This is what we faced, Thaxmore said as the recordings played. This is why only 58 ships returned from a fleet of 347. Supreme Commander Vexkari studied the recordings with growing unease. These weapons, how is this possible? The humans told us, sir. Every species we have conquered over the past 2 centuries. Some survivors escaped. They found their way to Earth. The humans gave them sanctuary, and in return, the survivors shared their knowledge and technology. The room erupted in angry voices. The idea that the collective's conquered species had been working together. Planning. Revenge was more than most of the leaders could accept. "Silence!" Supreme Commander Vexkari roared. "Continue your report, General." Thaxmore took a deep breath. "Sir, the humans sent us back with a message. They demand that the collective end its expansion. They claim that Earth and its allies will protect any species that asks for their help. They say the age of conquest is over." Fleet Admiral Grixtar laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "One system thinks it can stop the entire collective? We have thousands of ships, millions of soldiers." "Sir," Thaxmore said quietly, "they destroyed our fleet in less than an hour. And they weren't even trying to kill us. They could have erased every ship completely, but they chose to let us live so we could deliver their message." The recordings continued to play, showing the impossible ways the human ships had moved, the weapons that had twisted space and time, the precision with which they had disabled the Zephyrian fleet without unnecessary casualties. Supreme Commander Vexkari was silent for a long time after the recordings ended. Finally, he spoke. "What is your military assessment, General? Could we defeat them with a larger force?" Thaxmore had been dreading this question. "Sir, I don't believe so. The humans showed us only a fraction of their capabilities. They have technology that we don't understand and cannot counter. More importantly, they have had 2 centuries to study our tactics and weaknesses. They knew exactly how to defeat us before we even arrived. You're suggesting that the collective surrender to these humans? I'm suggesting that we take their offer seriously, sir. They don't want to destroy us. They want us to stop conquering other species. If we refuse..." Thaxmore activated another section of the recordings, showing the moment when the human ships had transformed into something beyond understanding, when space itself had been twisted into a weapon. "If we refuse, sir, I believe they will come here. And I don't think our home defenses will be any more effective than our invasion fleet was." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some leaders demanded immediate retaliation, calling for the entire collective fleet to assault the human system. Others argued for caution, pointing out that humanity had already demonstrated their ability to destroy Zephyrian forces with ease. Finally, Intelligence Director Yapkol spoke up. "Sir, we have lost contact with 3 of our outer colonies in the past month. The last transmissions indicated that they were being approached by unknown ships offering them a choice: join the human alliance or remain under collective control, the I." Room fell silent again. The implications were clear. The humans weren't waiting for the collective's decision. They were already moving to implement their plan. "How many colonies have we lost?" Supreme Commander Vexkari asked. "Unknown, sir. The humans' stealth technology makes it impossible for us to track their movements. For all we know, they could be approaching any of our worlds right now." Supreme Commander Vexkari stood up and walked to the great window that looked out over the collective's capital city. Millions of Zephyrians lived and worked in the sprawling metropolis below, all of them dependent on the empire that their military had built through 2 centuries of conquest. "Send a message to Earth," he said finally. "Tell them we wish to open negotiations." The message that traveled from the collective's homeworld to Earth was very different from the first transmission General Thaxmore had received. It was formal, respectful, and carried the weight of an empire that had suddenly discovered it was not the most powerful force in the galaxy. Dr. Chen received the message while he was having breakfast with his sister in the cafeteria of Luna Station. The artificial moon had returned to its disguised state, looking once again like a natural satellite. Only now, Admiral Chen was not the only person who knew the truth about humanity's preparations. "They want to negotiate," Dr. Chen said, reading the message on his tablet. "They're offering to discuss terms for a peaceful coexistence agreement." Admiral Chen sipped her coffee and looked out at the Earth hanging in space beyond the cafeteria. Windows. "What do you think? Are they sincere?" "I think they're terrified," Dr. Chen replied. The reports from our liberation fleets indicate that the collective is losing colonies faster than they can respond to. 47 species are taking their freedom back, and the Zephyrians can't stop them. Good. That was always the plan. Dr. B. Chen nodded. The plan had been simple in concept, but required centuries to implement. Give the survivors of the collective's conquests a new home, share technology and knowledge, build a force capable of challenging the Empire, and then offer them a choice. Change willingly or be forced to change. What should we tell them? Admiral, Chen asked. Dr. Chen stood up and walked to the window. Below him, Earth turned slowly in space, blue and green and beautiful. Around the planet, nearly invisible to the naked eye, the defense platforms and hidden installations continued their eternal watch. We tell them the same thing we told General Thaxmore, he said. The age of conquest is over. The enslaved species are free. The collective can adapt to this new reality, or they can be replaced by something better. 6 months later, the first collective ships arrived at Earth carrying diplomatic envoys instead of invasion forces. The negotiations that followed would reshape the galaxy, establishing new rules for interstellar relations and creating protections for less advanced civilizations. But the most important change had already happened. Throughout the galaxy, on worlds that had been enslaved for generations, people looked up at the stars and knew that somewhere out there, other beings cared about their freedom. Earth had become more than a planet. It had become a symbol of hope. And in the depths of space, hidden ships continued their quiet patrol, ensuring that the promise made to 47 liberated worlds would never be broken. The humans had learned something important from their history. Peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. The warning they had given to General Thaxmore had been simple and honest. Aggressive action would be inadvisable. Now the entire galaxy understood why those quiet words had carried so much weight. Humanity had spoken softly, but they had carried the biggest stick in the known universe.